whether you're talking about prebiotics in the bowels, or whether you're talking about fasting and the immune system, whether you're talking about meat intake and fibre, or dairy products, or gluten and what it does to the intestines, acid and alkaline balances, sunlight, vitamin D, calcium, doesn't really matter what you talk about. They all meet in one central place, and they all get tied in that one place, which is your bowel and digestion. And let's start out with the very, very first thing that we'll be talking about and going into a lot of detail tonight, which is constipation. So yeah, we're starting right there. And it is one of those things in the West that we are pretty much, most of us, chronically constipated. It's very, very common because your colon is your sewage system. And if you can imagine out in the world, if you actually had a sewage system that kept coming out into the streets, we'd all be sick all the time. And it literally is the similar thing with the human body, whereas if you're not controlling your sewage and your removal of that waste, you do get unwell. Because of course that's where your immune system lives. 85% of your immune system right there, sitting right in that area where the waste is coming through and the body's doing a cleansing process, is right there in the gut. So keeping your sewage system healthy, or what I like to call your internal toilet, is really important. And a healthy digestive system, if you want to know what a healthy, regular digestive system is, it's more than once a day, that's for sure. One bowel motion for every meal we eat. So it's 3 meals in and 3 meals out, and 3 meals in and 3 meals out every day, and 3 meals in and 3 meals out. And the bottom line with most Kiwis, of course, we considered and we think that going once a day is regular. But of course once a day is not regular. Once a day is constipated. Less than twice a day is constipated. So 3 meals in, 3 meals out. And the thing that we've lost is what we call the natural colic gastric reflux. And that's a really interesting thing, and we'll go into the history of why we've lost that and how we've lost that shortly. But the bottom line is that has been lost through years of a lack of fibre in our diets. And so we've inherited that kind of genetic fault, as it were. Digestive system naturally evacuates and empties itself after each meal. That's the design. As the food comes down, the body goes, oh, we need to create some space, get rid of some of that waste, and the bowel evacuates, and then you go. And it's pretty much like a baby. So the golden rule is eat, then eliminate. Eat, then eliminate, eat, then eliminate. That's how the human body is designed. And you see it with animals, and you see it with babies. And for those mothers that are here this evening, and you remember when you were breastfeeding your children, you get your little child, and they'd be fine, and they'd be a little bundle, and you put them on the breast, and as soon as they started breastfeeding, and the nappy, it's the first thing that happens. And we all remember it. Eat and eliminate. The body goes, we've got food coming in, it's time to eliminate. And you see it with animals as well. I was out walking in Cornwall Park this morning, and I couldn't help but notice, I was walking and I saw the cows getting up and starting to graze, and as soon as they start to graze and stand up, they eliminate, going in one end, coming out the other. This is very, very common, and of course we've lost it. If you go less than twice a day, you're constipated. That's the thing to watch for, and we'll talk about how to cure constipation completely and what to do tonight, so we'll cover all of that, which is really good information, because I know everyone wants to know how to sort that out. But if you don't get rid of that waste every day, it does get stored. And the trick here is to get rid of it fully and completely. And how do you do that? Of course, the key thing is increasing your fibre intake. It's the most important thing. It's one of those central pieces of the program, is increasing your fibre intake. Where does the body store it? On your gut, your stomach, your love handles, your visceral fat, your neck, your thighs, all those areas, of course, that's where we store it. That's where we store that waste. And many middle-aged people have between 1 and 7 kilos of undigested fecal matter stuck in their colon. And that's after a bowel motion. So 1 to 7 kilos, if you actually have a look at it, it's quite a lot. And how do we know that? Well, there's a number of ways we know that. One of them is that we've put on more weight. The average weight of an average Westerner, in particular Kiwi, was 74.3 kilos in 1997. That was the average weight of the nation. We're now 85 kilos. So there's been a huge increase, and of course that whole changing of the definition of what size is, and we'll get into that a little bit later on as well. So that changing of the size causes, of course, a lot of that weight to be stored in the body. But also there was a fascinating study done in America where they had 300 people, and they had their doctor's reports, and they had their reports on whether they were constipated or not and what their health was like. And then after these people had died, they did autopsies. And before they died, the people had rated themselves as being constipated or not. 15 people said they were constipated. When the autopsies were done, 285 people were constipated. So there's a real disconnect between what we think is constipation, whether we are constipated, and then the food we're eating and how it's causing constipation and what the fallout of that is. So there's this huge disconnect between normal, regular bowel health and constipation. And most of us consider that we're not constipated, but most of us in the West are, just literally by living in the environment that we do. and eating the food that we've been brought up on. The other one is colon hydrotherapy. And if you ever talk to a colon hydrotherapist, they're the people that live and breathe your bum waste. You know, they literally are there every day, and you lie down and they plug a tube in your bum, and you know, they clean out your bum. That's what they do. And I know a woman called Milena from TaranakiDetox.co.nz, I believe is her website in Taranaki. And I've been down there, I've done some colon hydrotherapy with her, and I've talked with her, and I've been down there when she's had clients come through, and it's amazing the stories that she has to tell about people just regularly going once a week, once every 3 or 4 days, and thinking it's normal, and just the rife constipation that she has to deal with. So it's a very widespread problem, and if you put it simply, the simplest way to get it through is constipation will kill you. Long-term constipation is one of those predominant causes of so many of the Western illnesses, and that'll become clear over the course of the night. So what will save your life? Vegetable fibre. Vegetable fibre is crucial. It's it's so important. New Zealand women have the highest rates of bowel cancer of any group of women in the world. #1 rates in the world. New Zealand women also have the #1 intake of meat in the world. Now, is there a connection between meat intake and constipation and bowel cancer? We know there is. The World Cancer Research Fund will tell you over 1,000 studies done on diet and cancer. The biggest single precursor to bowel cancer is meat intake. We know that. And the other thing we know about meat is the lack of fibre. Of course, what happens is if you're eating a very meat-centric diet, you're replacing that dietary fibre. And it's that fibre that goes through and cleans out your bowel. And of course, the irony is that fibre, vegetable fibre, is what prevents bowel cancer as well. We'll get to that as well. So worldwide, the difference between the highest and the lowest levels of bowel cancer and colon cancer around the world is about tenfold, which means that it's actually environmental, not genetic. It's nothing to do with genetics. And we know genetics, when it comes to bowel cancer, 97% of bowel cancer is non-genetic. So we know that only 3% is genetic. So if you look at that, you start to see the differences with the different countries, completely about diet and completely about environment. So if you've got that kind of diet, when you've got the processed meat intake, there's a lot of processed meat, and then you've got the sugar-rich carbohydrates, then you mix that in with the rancid refined fats, and then you mix that in with the high gluten foods, that is guaranteed to cause bowel problems. That is the perfect recipe. There is no perfect recipe better than that. That will do it. So bowel disease is recent, and that's the other thing to remember as we go through, is it's very, very recent. There's a lot of cultures that still don't have words for diverticulitis, or Crohn's disease, or irritable bowel syndrome, or IBD, all these different bowel diseases we have now, which we think are common. In a lot of places, they're still not common today. In 1900, it was almost non-existent. You can lower diverticulitis by 40% just by eating more fibre. Almost annihilate it. Now, what is diverticulitis? It's when you get little pockets of a diverticuli, or little bits of food, leftovers and things all caught in the little bends and folds of your colon. And they cause inflammation and constipation and pain and things. It's something that's very preventable. Hiatal hernia in Africa, for instance, 4 cases per 1,000 adults. In the West, 250 cases per 1,000 adults. So staggering, 62 times higher. And you compare somewhere like New Zealand with Nigeria or Uganda, and you find that we have 1,300% higher rates of colon cancer than they do. What do we eat? Highly processed diet. What do they eat? A high fibre, unprocessed diet. Very categorical difference, very black and white when you start to look at it. So when you go back to when the low fibre diet was introduced, many of us will know the story in terms of white flour, and when did white flour actually start coming about? It was about 1880. So that's when white flour started infiltrating into the food system. So around 1900, there was about 1 patient per hospital with heart problems. And in 1920, Sir William Osler wrote you could see about 1 patient per hospital suffering with heart problems. Now, we also know Dr. Paul Dudley White spent 10 years going around the UK looking for anyone with heart problems. He found 3 people. In 1920, he spent 10 years, he found 3 people with heart problems. And he was actually looking for them. That's what he was doing. He was a doctor looking for it. So we know there's been this massive explosion of heart disease. People eating that low fibre diet, if you can imagine being born in 1880, you started growing up, you started hitting middle age at about 1930, you'd be about 50, and you'd be the first generation brought up on a low fibre diet. From 1931 to 1976, that generation had the biggest explosion of heart disease in history. 800% increase in heart disease in 1 generation. And of course, we're the children of that generation, having been brought up on a low fibre diet. 100 years ago, there was less than 1 patient per hospital. That's how out of control it's gotten. Now, Americans, interesting, classic here, they have the lowest fibre intake, but the highest heart attack rates. Whereas the Japanese have the highest fibre intake, excuse me, and the lowest heart attack rates. And you can see on all the charts with all the developed countries, high heart attack rates, low fibre. As soon as you start to increase fibre, the heart attacks drop, like that. And then you get up to the countries with the highest fibre intake with the lowest heart attack rates. We know the direct correlation between fibre and heart disease. We also know the direct correlation between bowel cancer and fibre. And we know all cancers in fibre. So there's a huge correlation between the two. So it's really interesting when you start to look at the history. The Czech Republic's another good one. It's one of my favourites. Because when you look at the Czech Republic, their basic diet. Anyone here from the Czech Republic? You'll know what I'm talking about. Right, so the Czech Republic diet is meat, dairy products, cream, poultry, cheese, a lot of pastries, white flour. It's incredible. And the Czech colon cancer rate is 34 deaths per 100,000 people. So 34 out of every 100,000 men in Czech die of colon cancer. Now the Indian diet, if you look at the traditional Indian diet, not the modern Western Indian diet, which is starting to give them the same problems as the rest of the world, but the traditional diet is brown rice, legumes, lots of vegetables, of course, fruits, nuts, seeds, spices, things like that. And the Indian colon cancer rate is 0.63 deaths per 100,000 people. Now, to put that in context, and this is where it gets really staggering, in the Czech Republic there's about 10 million people. In India there's 1.2 billion people. That's 120 times more people. Yet the Czech men have 54 times higher colon cancer rates than Indian men. So you've got a population that is 120 times bigger, but the other population has 54 times higher rates of colon cancer. It's staggering. What is the clear difference? What is the thing between the two? A whole food, high fibre, plant-based diet. Critical difference between the two. The levels of fibre are through the roof in India, because basically biggest population of vegetarians on the planet, eating a high fibre diet. So there's virtually no bowel disease in rural Africa. I never saw one patient in 20 years of surgical practice. That's Dr. Dennis Burkett, very famous British surgeon who spent 25 years in rural Africa doing surgery on people. Never found one patient with bowel disease, 25 years. Over 90% of all chronic diseases are due to infection of the gastrointestinal tract. This is Royal Society of Medicine, UK. So mainstream science distinguishing that 90% of the problems that we have are due to infections and problems in the digestive gastrointestinal area. And eat more vegetable fibre, live far longer. And this is the fallout from a 10-year study on 388,000 people by the National Institutes of Health. So it doesn't matter what you look from, whether you look from an epidemiological, from Japan versus America, or if you look at the Czech Republic versus India, or if you look at the science behind national medicine reviews, or if you look at the National Institutes of Health, it doesn't really matter where you look. Science and tradition say exactly the same thing. Eat more vegetable fibre. Make a massive difference to your health. So fibre prevents bowel disease. We know that as well. Your bowels love bulk fibre. The more bulk fibre you can have, the happier your bowels are. It attracts and it removes that carcinogenic waste. Just gets rid of it all. The stuff that's sitting in your bowel, which runs your entire health profile, gets removed with bulk fibre. What's the best sources of bulk fibre, of course? Raw, sprouted and fermented foods. Those same old three that come through in all the different bits of research and traditional diets of different people. Traditional high fibre diets are about 100 grams a day. I eat probably between 60 and 100 grams of fibre a day. I go 3 times like clockwork. Now, I used to be chronically constipated. When I was sick with my asthma and my skin problems and all that, I'd be going once a day, once every second day. And it was a kind of one as well. Very different now, where it's a, I want to go, and I go, and that's it. A couple of wipes and we're out of there. So very different experience of bowel motions. Now, what's the difference? My diet, the level of fibre that I eat, and the level of water, of course. So again, like I say, during the seminar, I'll give you the 7 guaranteed steps to cure constipation. So you'll get that this evening. So it's a wonderful thing to have as well. So vegetable fibre feeds your beneficial bacteria. And the crucial thing about vegetable fibre, separate to other fibres, is that it creates apoptosis. Not only does it bring down and lower inflammation, but it creates apoptosis, which is the death of cancer cells in the bowel. So if you really look at it, you're looking at a high meat diet containing the very things that we know create colon cancer and removing all fibre from the bowel. And then you've got a high vegetable fibre diet, which has got the very thing that's killing colon cancer cells in the gut. So you can see that balance is what's so important in the gut, is having enough of that vegetable fibre. Whether you eat meat or not is a whole other conversation, but having enough fibre in the bowel is critical, no matter what else you're eating, no matter what other vegetable intake you're eating. Another one of my favourite quotes is, there are 2 ways to die: oldness and bowel diseases. Almost all diseases are produced by a dirty bowel, where the fecal material is absorbed into the blood, attacking our weakest part. If the bowels are blocked weakened or not working, regulating efficiently, then there is a higher burden and stress on the other channels, and this puts pressure on all the other systems. It's from a long-term nutritionist, I believe it's Dr. Bernard Jensen who wrote that. Fabulous quote, because it really sums up what happens is when you block your toilet, all the other systems fall over, and that's what happens. It's exact fallout of what happens with a dirty bowel. Your bowel is basically your toilet, and of course we don't go to the toilet 6 times every day and flush once. You know, if you're going to go to the toilet 6 times, you've got to flush 6 times. But of course what we do is we sometimes eat 6 meals, but we go once. Well, where are the other 5 meals hiding? That's the question. And of course we know where they're hiding, in our gut, around our waist, on our bum, in our thighs. Death begins in the colon. That's where the problems begin. Most illness in the bowels begins in the bowels. And this is where our natural defense mechanisms, like our immune system, is worn down. And that immune system, 85% right there. And of course your immune system runs your respiratory system. Your respiratory system decides whether you're going to get sick or not, depending of course on things like sunlight levels and sleep and vitamin D, and we'll go into that another night. But such a crucial part of the immune system is your respiratory system. Fibre feeds the prebiotic foods and probiotic foods, which create the essential fatty acids for the brain and the adrenal glands and the liver and your sex drive, you know, all those different aspects, energy aspects as well that we have. So important just to keep that clean. So not only does fibre remove all the waste, it also feeds us goodness as well. So there's a double whammy. Fusobacterium is present in high levels in colorectal tumours. Tumours and their surroundings contain cancer cells, normal cells, and a variety of microorganisms such as bacteria. The relationship between cancer cells and their microenvironment may promote cancer formation and growth. And this is a fascinating article from the head researcher Matthew Myerson from Dana-Farber Cancer Clinic in the States. And it's a fascinating overview because he really talks about, well look, you've got an environment in your bowel where your microenvironment has got cancer cells, normal cells, bacterium and viruses all working together. And it's actually the microenvironment in there which dictates which way it goes. And of course that microenvironment is dictated to by what? Diet. That's what dictates it. What has the biggest influence in there is vegetable intake. Vegetation is the biggest influence in your bowel, on the health benefits in your bowel. So your incredible 30-foot gastrointestinal system, that picture that I had up earlier on, right at the beginning of the seminar, includes your tummy, of course, your stomach, your liver, your gallbladder, your duodenum, your ascending colon and your transverse colon, your descending, your small intestine, and your sigmoid, your appendix, which we'll cover off later, your cecum and your anus. So that's pretty much summing up your incredible 30-foot gastrointestinal system. Now we could do 2 hours just on this one part of the topic tonight, but we're not going to, so I'm going to just briefly touch on how it works and what we need to do with it. It basically starts at the mouth and ends at the butt. That's the first thing to remember. So starts here, ends down here. So that is your gastrointestinal system. So what's in between is that foods go in, they get broken down into nutrients, they then feed, repair, rebuild the human body, trigger your genetic expression, stimulate your immune system, build your bones and all the different things, and then the waste comes out. So if you're eating food that does all that, then you're doing a really good job. The body basically breaks everything down into liquid before it then dehydrates it and dries it and compacts it as well, which we'll get to shortly. But that's the process of eating. And the digestive system is going right now, like it's churning and going 24/7. And it's one of those reasons why fasting is so effective for transforming your gut, because if you can give your body a break every now and again, it will be really happy, it will clean out the liver and all these different things will happen in your gut. So it's going the whole time. Right now it's going. Whatever you ate a little while ago, it's going right now and it'll continue to go through the night. And the aim is a healthy, non-constipated system with about 90% of the absorption happening all in the small intestine. That's where we want to absorb all the goodness, and that's where the goodies come from. So the 3 basic functions of your entire digestive gastrointestinal system are digestion, absorption, and elimination. Food goes in, break it down, absorb it, feed the body, move the waste out. So if any one of those 3 things goes wrong, that's when you get trouble. So all those 3 things we want to have happening one after another in that order. So how does digestion work? Well, it starts off with your teeth grinding, and it's one of those reasons that grandma used to say, sit down and don't watch TV, chew your food 30 times before you swallow. All those great bits of advice were based on fact, because the more you grind up the food, the more the salivary enzymes start to break it down. You get a better digestion. And when we're born, we have an amazing backup enzyme reserve. So when we're young, we've got these amazing enzymes that back us up. Over time, when we're eating bad diet, of course, we start to eat away at all those enzymes. But if you eat enough raw, sprouted and fermented foods and vegetable fibre and chew it properly, then you'll help protect that precious enzyme reserve, which is so important. And of course, if the body does get run down, and if you're eating a lot of hamburgers and pizzas and rubbish and things, the body then will have foods that have no digestive enzyme capacity at all. So then the body actually has to start creating enzymes to break it down. And where does it steal those enzymes from? Your pancreas and your immune system. One of the reasons why you eat a lot of junk food, you get sick, because literally the pancreas gets busy making enzymes to break down the constipating food, as opposed to doing its job, creating insulin and keeping the body healthy. So the body gets kind of swayed off path. And the pre-digested foods that are raw, sprouted and fermented are broken down by about 75% before the hydrochloric acid kicks in the stomach and then takes over. That deactivates all the enzyme backup. So the enzyme activity then happens. Hydrochloric acid inactivates the enzymes, break down what's left, sends the nutrient mix down to the intestine. And then the small intestine, and this is one of those crucial things that you've heard me talk about in a lot of different seminars. The small intestine is where you do your absorption. It's really important because when you're eating a lot of, for instance, high gluten foods and high processed foods, they beat down on those little hair-like villi fingers that are in your small intestines, and they are the very fingers that suck the goodness out of your food. So when a little bit of iron comes through, suck that iron up. When a little bit of calcium comes through, suck that calcium up. So what happens with people if they're eating a lot of foods that are beating down the villi in those fingers? And it's one of the reasons I recommend a gluten-free diet for a sustained period, if not on and off for the rest of your life. Because gluten, the high levels of gliadin in gluten and bread beat down in the villi and make them very hard to absorb the nutrition. Which is why anyone with celiac disease or gluten intolerance has 10 times higher rates of anemia and osteoporosis. And there's a direct fallout of that nutritional deficiency from a beaten down villi in the gut, which comes from those high levels of badly processed grains. So the pancreas reintroduces digestive enzymes and helps us break down the food. And then nutrients are absorbed through the thin intestinal wall where they're sent to the human body to rebuild your body. And that's how you get 97% of a human rebuild every year. It's through that process. That's the digestion process. This is a really nice picture that I thought I'd put in from veganrawdiet.com. Now I'm not saying that I recommend you eat 100% raw or you're a complete vegan. I'm not saying that at all. I'm using this picture as an example of what the different mixtures are and why they're so good. For instance, starting off here with the bulk of your foods in your diet around leafy green vegetables. Very high fiber. Of course, this is pretty much what man has evolved on. What did the Neanderthals eat? What did the Paleolithic men eat? What did all the different evolutions, the Roman gladiators, what did we all eat throughout history? Leafy green vegetables, leafy green vegetation. It could be rhizomes or stems or barks or leafy greens or grass or anything at all. But it was all leafy greens, one of the crucial things that we grew up on. Second area, of course, you've got your fruits and vegetables. You know, the nicer, sweeter things like bananas and things, and the root vegetables like carrots. Third area is that well-processed, intelligently done, whole grain, sprout, legumes areas. And of course, I recommend sprouting a lot because sprouting creates magic with whole grains and legumes. So a nice mixture there. Then you've got your good protein foods, your nuts, your seeds, your flax, your hemp seeds, things like that. Then you've got your spirulinas and your seaweeds and things like that, and your wheatgrass juice as well. So this is where, of course, the bulk of what you're eating is. And of course, some people will require much higher levels of protein than others, and that's fine. We're all unique. So some people need high levels, some people can have lower levels. It doesn't really matter. There's no golden rule, but the basic is have that basic fibrous intake as the background to the whole diet. So your liver is critical. That's a key part of your digestive system. It filters and cleans the blood. That's the crucial thing the liver does. But it also gets rid of all those fats and toxins. So important to have a healthy liver. Because if you get organ cancer of any sort, most of the time, about 95% of people with organ cancer of any sort will die of liver failure. Because, of course, once your organ gets that sick with cancer, it has to process all the carcinogenic waste through the liver. And if your liver is fatty or sick or unwell, the liver dies, and then you die of liver failure. So, of course, the liver failure is a huge death rate with people with cancer. So, you know, keeping your liver healthy is really important, and fasting regularly is one of those great things to do. The other key thing with your liver is green. For those that forget it, always remember, if you want a healthy liver, you must eat more greens. And I'm talking good leafy green vegetables. So these substances must be carried through the entire intestine without being absorbed. So you've got to protect the intestines with the waste that comes out of the liver. And the remainder is then pushed through. And of course, what do we push it through with? Fiber and water. Two crucial aspects to curing constipation is fiber and water. And we'll get to that shortly. But of course, a golden rule to remember is fiber without water is cement. So if you're eating fiber without enough water, you will constipate yourself even more. So it's that fine balance. And one of the neat things about Mother Nature, she tends to give us fiber-rich foods that are full of water. So it's actually quite easy to do. It's not actually that hard. So if you get a clogged liver, you then get malfunctioning and all kinds of problems like the filter in a fish tank. For those that have ever had a fish tank, as soon as the filter goes wrong and you can't get rid of that waste, all the fish die, just like that. And of course, what do we live in? What's the liquid that we live in? Is our blood. And of course, the liver dictates the health of the blood, the liver and the kidneys. And of course, that blood that floods across us the whole time, we're pumping all this blood through the human body the entire time. While we're sitting here right now, it's going across everything, washing and changing everything. Our entire life is dictated to by blood. So your waste removal process falls apart once your liver goes out. So your large intestine is the other interesting one, because that main job of that is basically to remove the waste. That's the part where you really get all that constipation happening in the large intestine. The waste material must be dehydrated, so the opposite, collected and then compacted with fibre. So where do we get our fibre from? We'll talk about that in a minute as well. A healthy colon then mixes all that up with a good level of water to create good, healthy, regular stools that then get released. And of course, a healthy stool will prevent just about every disease that we know of to do with the bowel. Whether it's, bowel disease, constipation, inflammatory disease, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, diverticulitis, hemorrhoids, colon cancer, IBD, all those different areas in the bowel all get incredibly impacted by the effectiveness and the health of your stools and how regularly they go every day. It's why constipation is so important. So a crucial piece of advice is to respect your intestines. Really respect them. They're wafer thin. You see the lining of the intestines is wafer thin. It's incredible. You ever seen that movie Alien or Aliens? There's an incredible scene with the mother alien, and she's got this incredible long kind of intestinal thing where she's laying eggs, this big kind of tail that comes off her, and it's just so thin you can see it as the little eggs come out. It's a very good representation of what our intestines actually look like, that movie. And it's very thin, and you can see how it can fall apart very easily. So your intestines are this long, incredible, flexible tube, as we know, 30 foot long or so, with countless folds and turns, and that's where the little bits of dirt and stuff get caught. Well, not so much dirt, but food gets stuck in there, and that's where we get diverticuli, which gives us diverticulitis. So to block and intoxicate this, if you want to intoxicate and block this part of the body, it's easy. All you need to do is do this, right? Drink alcohol, eat sugary, low fibre rich foods, white flour, antibiotics, take some regular drugs, have some processed meat and some food additives. That's the mixture that'll do it, okay? So it's an easy enough thing to do it. So how do you undo that? We'll get to that in a minute, but what that does, that particular mixture of foods and alcohol and drugs, is that chronic mixture. It kills off and destroys your hydrochloric acid, which of course is a key part of breaking your food down, which is a key part of giving you the very goodness out of the food. Because the whole point of that food is you want it for fuel and goodness. That's what you need it for, nutritional needs. Grows bad bacteria, grows fungi, grows parasites, infections, leads to liver stress, IBS and immune, nervous, joint, muscle disorders. So there's a whole fallout of what happens in the bowel directly from that kind of food hitting your bowel. The other thing to respect is your appendix. And whenever I talk about appendix, I see some people go west because some people have had appendicitis or they had their appendix chopped out. We'll get to that in a minute. But the appendix is incredibly important, and it's very, very underestimated in the West. Of course, your appendix is attached to your colon. What it does is it specializes in harboring and protecting your probiotic bacteria. So the very bacteria here, the 100 trillion cells that you've got in your gut, which run your health profile right here, you've got about 10 trillion here. The 100 trillion in your gut that completely dominate your immune system, your energy levels, the entire way the body's rebuilt, that's your symbiotic probiotic bacteria. And of course, that is harbored and protected by your appendix. That's what it's there for. So we know what it's actually there for. It's a major factor in your immune system being strong, protected and functioning, your appendix. So look after your appendix. Appendicitis, for those that don't know, was named in 1886 by a Harvard professor, and up until about 1880 it was pretty much rare. It was one of those not even named. I mean, that's how rare it was. It didn't even have a name. So the interesting thing is it predominantly strikes in the Western world. Low fibre, non-squatting Western world. I'll get to squatting later on, and you all know what I'm going to talk about, right? So we'll get to squatting and we'll talk about that. But the interesting thing is when you look at appendicitis rates, they're massive whenever people don't squat and don't eat enough fibre. That's where appendicitis goes nuts. And of course, where is the country where is the least amount of squatting and the lowest fibre intake? America. The most common American surgery, 300,000 appendixes chopped out every year. Unbelievable. 1 million appendixes chopped out and thrown away every 36 months. Kind of staggering when you think about it. So if you ask a doctor what causes appendicitis, and why it only strikes in the Western world, and why it's only people that don't squat and have a low fibre diet, they'll say, well, we don't know. That's the interesting thing about it. So plant fibre is roughage. Roughage is plant fibre. Same thing. Carbohydrate, sugar, and starch, bonded together sugar, our prime sources of energy, which of course we know it's what we run on. The fuel that we run on is glucose, which gets converted into glycogen in the human body. And whole food carbohydrates always coexist perfectly with fibre, water, antioxidants, and nutrients. By the way, antioxidants is one of my own words. It means antioxidants from plants. That's a antioxidant. That's where most of them live. But the neat thing about Mother Nature is she gives us all those foods together. She always provides them together. We don't actually have to do anything to it. It's all there in a perfect mixture. The bottom line is fibre-rich foods clean your system like nothing else ever will and protect you from harm like nothing else ever will. That is their aim, and that's what they do, particularly your green vegetables. That green leafy vegetable mixture. They give a better cleansing of the bowel and a better cleansing of the system than any other food. Whole food carbohydrates do not result in weight gain. There's a lot of myth conception about this, as I like to say, myth conceptions. Whole food carbohydrates do not, complex carbohydrates do not. How do we know that? Well, let's take a look at the centenarians who have lived the longest, the Okinawans, the slim Japanese, the healthy Chinese population, the healthy Africans, the rural Africans, the lean Indians. Some of the places around the world, the Sardinians, the Akarans with the highest longevity rates in the world and the healthiest longevity rates, so living into their 90s and 100s with no sickness, with no drugs. These are the people that eat the highest levels of complex carbohydrates. Now, whether they have meat and other things as well, that's fine. Some of them do, some of them don't. That's irrelevant. The relevancy here is the predominant amount of their diet is based around complex carbohydrates. And that is the one thing you can link them all with. However, when you remove that fibre, when you suck that fibre out of the foods, sugar floods into the bloodstream, glucose levels go through the roof, and then the body goes, oh my God, and they store all that sugar as fat all around the body. Then you start to get into overweight, food cravings, and you get into this vicious cycle. So I'm not talking about that. And that's where bad carbs, you've heard the term, comes from, is that carbs that have had all the fibre removed. So the white rice is a bad carb, whereas brown rice is a good carb. So very different in that sense. So avoid hamburgers. They're a great example of what is one of the lowest fibre foods on the planet. Fibre and water move the bowels, as we know. No fibre, nothing to push it through. So if you haven't got enough fibre, you cannot push the bowels through. The waste will not go through. So literally you get into that where you're trying to strain to get it out because there's nothing in there naturally doing the peristalsis. There's nothing actually moving it through. So white flour, white sugar, meat, cheese, rancid oil, eggs, and additives all contain no fibre. So there's zero fibre in those foods. Now some of those foods have benefits, some don't, but there's no fibre, and that's the critical thing here. Guess what a hamburger or a pizza is made of? White flour, white sugar, meat, cheese, rancid oil, eggs, and additives. So yes, avoid hamburgers and avoid pizzas. Yes, very good advice. So how much fibre do I need? People always ask me this, how much do I need? Well, typically we get about 10 grams a day. Now 25 grams a day lowers your fatal heart disease by 17%, almost 1 in 5. So, just by doubling your fibre, you can cut your heart disease risk by 1 in 5. So if there's any heart disease risk in your family or any heart disease at all in the family, increase your vegetable fibre and you immediately start annihilating it. I recommend between 60 and 100 grams a day. Now I'll get to how to get that in a minute, and this is the minimum intake of a lot of those healthy centenarians like the Sardinians, the Africans, the Asians, the Indians, the Okinawas, the Japanese, the Chinese. They have a very, very high fibre intake. And chimpanzees consume about 300 grams a day. So if you want to be healthy like a chimp, and of course don't have diabetes or cancer or anything at all, eat about 300 grams a day. That's a lot. You'll be going a little bit more regularly, but you'll certainly get it out. Interesting thing is it's actually not hard to do. It's a really good example of a typical high fibre day is simply this. Breakfast being a soaked muesli. Obviously you guys know all about my love for soaked muesli, so you've all got the recipe, with stewed fruit or a banana on top. So simple. There's a high fibre breakfast. It'll give you a lot of grams of fibre. For lunch and or dinner, make half of what you eat vegetables or greens, as much leafy greens as you can. Fibrous, remember. That's where folate comes from, foliage, folate from foliage, so green leafy vegetables. Also things like beans and tofu and whole grains and bread and sourdough bread obviously is the way to eat bread. If you're going to eat bread and whole grains, the only way to eat pasta if you're going to eat it. Obviously they're foods that I don't recommend a lot of, smaller amounts as a treat. And then snacks, 3 to 6 pieces of fruit or raw vegetables. That will give you plenty of fibre. You don't have to measure it, you don't have to check your intake, you don't have to do any science with it all. That will give you plenty. So you notice that if you're basing your meals around those kind of vegetable foods, you'll be getting plenty of fibre. So fibre cures constipation. Constipation essentially is impossible if you're eating enough high fibre plant food intelligently. Fibre is rough and fibrous. It acts as an internal broom, and water creates bulk to remove everything from the gut. And our bowels work much more efficiently and effectively when we have enough bulk fibre. Basically, the more bulk fibre you have, the more effectively your bowel works, and then the better you respond. And then the lower the levels of disease, particularly to do with bowel disease. Now, vegetable fibre is the thing to remember here, because that is the most important. Of all the different fibres, vegetable fibre is the most important, followed then by fruit, followed by legume and whole grain fibres. And the very interesting thing is when you look at cancer rates and fruit intake, you always find that the cancer rates are lowest where the fruit intake is highest. And as soon as you start to drop your fruit intake, the cancer rates go up, particularly bowel cancer. So direct relationship between fruit fibre as well, which contains a lot of vitamins and minerals that stimulate the immune system. So a real kind of double whammy with fruit and vegetables. So fibre is only found in plants. So there's 6 food groups that contain fibre. Here are the 6. Number 1, fruit, obviously. I've put up here on the projector some of the common examples of the best, highest fibre levels in different fruits and vegetables. So obviously fruits, the best is apples, grapefruit and pineapple. And of course, part of the whole advice of an apple a day keeps the doctor away, a key part of that is the fibre. And apples are incredibly rich in vitamin C, incredibly rich in soluble and insoluble fibre, pectins, anti-breast cancer, incredible things. I'll go over apples in a minute. Number 2, vegetables. Vegetables are another food group, very, very high in fibre. And of course, this is the most important group. And some great examples are celery, broccoli, and carrots. Carrots are a wonderful high fibre food. Nuts, number 3. Almonds are very good, walnuts, Brazil nuts. Seeds, of course, many of you know, flax seeds, sunflowers, pumpkins. Number 5, whole grains, things like brown rice, millet, oats, and then legumes, your beans and your lentils, soybeans, things like that. So, soluble fibres come in a few different areas, but the key thing to remember is soluble is inside and insoluble is outside. So soluble is inside everything, insoluble is outside. It's the key thing to remember. So if you look at an apple, the inside of the apple, that white stuff, that's the soluble fibre that gets in and grabs onto the waste in the gut, dissolves in water, hence the name soluble fibre, so it dissolves in the liquid in your gut, grabs onto that toxins and wastes. It's why your liver loves soluble fibre so much, because all that bile and waste that comes out, the blood cholesterol levels and things that the liver's pumping into your waste, the digestive bile, grabs onto that, and it comes in things like mucilage and pectin and gum and inulin and things like that. Found in flaxseed and apples and bananas, peas, broccoli, all the lovely mixtures of things. And yes, you will be getting emails on this, covering all this, so don't worry about that. Soluble fibre, so a nice mixture for soluble fibre. The other one is insoluble fibres. So these are the other mixtures we need. And these are generally on the outside. So this is, of course, the crucial part we're missing, because insoluble is what soaks up the soluble and gives you a bowel motion. So the body breaks the food down, you get the soluble goes in, grabs all that waste from the liver, turns into a liquid, but it waits then for insoluble. Insoluble then comes along, creates the whole stool and removes it. And that's why you need soluble and insoluble. And of course, part of the problem now is we take the outside of everything off. Notice how, we were taught as children to peel our carrots. And, chop the outside skin off the apple. Take the skin off everything. Potatoes, you peel your potatoes, right? The best part of the potato is the skin and just underneath where all the potassium is. That's where you get potassium broth when you're fasting. So, we've got these generations now where we've been taught to remove the fibre, and it's particularly the insoluble fibre that does it. And the insoluble fibre is what cures constipation. So, of course, it's all part of that fallout of the outer skins being removed from everything that we eat. It creates bulk by removing waste material and makes it larger and softer and easier to do good poos. It scratches the bowel wall, gives you peristalsis, and prevents anemia and osteoporosis by really helping in the small intestine. I was talking earlier about if you're eating too much bread and too much of the high gluten foods that are refined, you'll wreck your small intestine. Protects the intestinal walls, includes things like lignans and waxes and fructans and all these unusual foods. Brown rice and legumes, nuts and whole leafy green vegetables. And you'll notice too that, again, even rice is a classic example, where most of the rice now that we eat and is sold is white rice. What is the one thing that's been removed? Insoluble fibre. Therefore, white rice is constipating. Brown rice is not. So really interesting when you start to look at it. And of course, you lose things like B1 and all these other things as well when you remove that. Brown rice, here we go, great example. The outer part of the brown rice contains a natural compound that inhibits an endocrine protein known as angiotensin II. Now, angiotensin 2 has been proven over and over again to raise our risk of heart disease. So whether you're looking scientifically at it or whether you're looking from an epidemiological study on Asian people, you can see that even scientifically, it raises our risk of heart disease. Now, science says, look, it's the compounds in the outside of the brown rice that raise our risk of heart disease and stop suppressing this different thing in the gut. So science takes it apart. But then if you actually stand back and you look, you go, okay, well, hang on, let's have a look. Traditionally, the Chinese and Japanese always ate brown rice, lowest levels of heart disease. Isn't that interesting? It says exactly the same thing that science has been saying. However, now, as more and more white rice is being eaten over the last few generations and more of the gluten in hamburgers and things like that, of course that's changing. So we can see it from an epidemiological standing back and looking at a country model, or we can see it as an exacting, analysing our nutritional mix in the gut and what foods are made of. It doesn't matter which way you look at it, it says exactly the same thing. Fibre prevents heart disease. Over and over again. What's killing half of us? Heart disease. You can start to see why this is such a crucial seminar, and it's why it's such a heart of the program, is making sure you get enough fibre. Flaxseed contains the same thing, gives you angiotensin 2, similar thing, so suppresses it. So let's have a look at a hamburger versus an apple. It's a great example because it really shows you the difference in what we get. With an apple you get soluble fibre, insoluble fibre, pectins and polyphenols, which are anti-breast cancer, high levels of prebiotics, which are food for your gut, enzymes, which of help you break the food down, carotenoids are the different colours in nature that give the antioxidants that we need, protect the human body, GMO free, so no genetic engineering in an apple, completely natural, contains about 60 cofactors in an apple, so you get all the different things to help you absorb the nutrition, stimulates disease prevention genes, so actually gives you a genetic predisposition and a genetic expression towards health and longevity, and lowers cancer rates and lowers asthma rates. Funnily enough, apples, there's a number of studies now showing eating an apple a day will categorically lower asthma rates. The irony is hamburgers raise asthma rates by about 75%, one hamburger a week. It's amazing when you start to look at it. So let's compare that with a hamburger. So hamburgers have zero fibre, zero plant nutrition, zero prebiotics, zero enzymes, is 100% processed, no cofactors, has no positive genetic effect, no oxidative effect at all, and causes cancer, heart disease, diabetes and asthma. So two foods, both snacks, both easy enough to do, one causes one thing, another causes another. And it's a great example of summarising up why you need to choose high fibre natural foods. So is there scientific proof? Yes, question? Homemade ham, well again it would be a case of looking at what the actual mixture is, and is a whole grain bun better than a white flour bun? Absolutely. Is it still going to cause you trouble? Absolutely. So it's a mixture of, looking at it on a scale of, worst food, best food, no question. If you're making your own food in any sense, it's always going to be better because you'll put more care, you'll have less additives, less preservatives, it won't have a lot of the other things added to it. So it's always better, yes. However, they should be looked at as a treat. Any kind of hamburger should be a treat. Once a month, that kind of treat. Yeah. So there you go. So is there scientific proof? Yes. Apart from the sheer logic of the countries with the lowest levels of fibre have the highest heart attack and bowel cancer rates, and the countries with the highest fibre have the lowest levels of heart disease and bowel cancer rates. Apart from that simple thing, there's a myriad of studies behind it. Absolute myriad. High fibre diets reduce your colorectal cancer risk by 50%, your colon cancer by 44%, your heart disease by 30%, reduces cravings and your appetite, protects you against breast cancers, hormone-dependent cancers like prostate cancer as well, lowers your overall risk of death by 19%, lowers progression of arteriosclerosis to do with heart disease, gives a 54% reduction in being asthmatic, significantly lowers your cardiovascular disease, obesity and type 2 diabetes, cuts pancreatic cancer risk by 40%, causes the death of cancer cells, apoptosis in the gut, blocks inflammation in the body, quickly removes large amounts of chemical waste, so protects your colon from damage if you're getting any kind of chemical poisoning, dramatically lowers your deadly abdominal fat and decreases blood cholesterol. So this is a small selection of studies that I've got about fibre and the differences that it has in the human body, so it makes a huge difference. So, I cannot escape certain elements of my childhood. Farts will always be funny. Johnny Depp. It's a great quote. Now, please put aside any sensible predilections to taste here. I'm just going to, because we have to get this out of the way. When you talk about bowel and digestive health, you must talk about farts. So I'm just going to talk about farts for a few minutes now, and I'm going to try not to laugh, but it is quite a funny thing, and we all, find it humorous. So just bear with me. I thought the first thing we should do is just remove concern about talking about farting from the room, so we can actually talk about farting. So I'm just going to read out some fart terms, just to give you a sense of what you can call farts, and I'm going to try to do this without laughing. So fluffing, flatulence, dropping a bunny, fire in the hole, killing the canary, morning thunder, the butt cheek squeak, the after dinner mint, that's one of my faves, cutting the cheese, bottom burp, letting one rip, silent but violent, the back door trumpet, that's a good one I reckon, colon cologne, could be marketed I reckon, rectal turbulence, a rotten stinker, laying one out, setting one free, a nostril burner, breaking wind and dropping one's guts. So I just wanted to kind of get that out because it's important, that we take the significance about fart talk out of the room before we get into farts. So what actually causes the smell? So there's two different kinds of fart smells, basically. One of them is that kind of toxic, burn your nostrils off, I have to leave the room, that kind of fart. So some of us have children that fart like that, of course. So, and that's basically unchewed, undigested food in your intestines are rotting. And that's not the kind of good fart smell that you want. So there's that. And then there's the other kind of fart smell, which is your intestine and your trillions of bowel bacteria adjusting to more high fiber foods. And that's more when you get more flatulence and more farting happen. And you might find that's happened as you increase your fiber, you get more farts starting to happen. And that's actually a changing of the bowel health. And of course, what you want to do is there's three basic families of bacteria in your gut. One is called Firmicutes, one is called Actinobacteria, and one's called Bacteroidetes. So what you want to have is a lot more Bacteroidetes and a lot less Firmicutes. And as your gut health changes, people that are healthy and live long have much, much higher levels of Bacteroidetes in their gut. Much higher levels. So literally you are rebuilding your gut health with what you eat. And you go through a process of the good bacteria eating the bad bacteria. Right, that's where the gas comes from. So it all starts to come out. So that's where that smell comes from. So farts are caused by things like food combinations, healthy bacteria fermenting, digesting and breaking down the bad bacteria. And this is a good thing, and these fart smells are generally not as bad. And also swallowing in the air when you eat. So if you're eating in a hurry and you're swallowing air, and they generally are the loud but proud, as we used to say when I was a kid. You do a really loud one, there's no smell at all, as opposed to the silent but violent, which is what you want to avoid. And I don't recommend doing that in picture theatre. That's not good. So farting can lower blood pressure, which is really important. So if you've got a fart, you must let it out. Yes, exactly. So if you've got a fart, you must let it out because they can literally cause heart attacks. So anyway, on the subject of how to fart less, let's talk about how to fart less. So number one, avoid the foods you cannot break down. Most of us will have a food. Trace, could I grab another couple of glasses of water, please? Avoid those foods that set you off. For some people it's eggs, some people it's garlic, some people it's cabbage. There's different kinds of foods that will make different people fart. Baked beans, of course, are a classic. Eat less. Of course, as you eat less, you take less air in. So if you just start fasting on air, there'll be no farts at all. And most of you will probably realise too, when you actually fast, if you've noticed, your farting will almost disappear when you're fasting. Almost gets completely wiped out. So if you eat slowly and you eat sitting down, that will also lower the amount of farts that you have. Relaxing after eating is important because blood then stays in the stomach as opposed to moving to the muscles to fuel your energy and expansion. Chew your food until it's liquid. I've got a great fart email on all this, by the way. So chew your food until it's liquid, so make sure you chew everything right thoroughly through. Eat digestive enzyme-rich foods. So your raw, sprouted and fermented, because they will regrow your gut bacteria as you go. And if beans give you wind, then you can put some herbs and spices, things like aniseed in the pot, and they will significantly lower the farting from beans. The other thing is if you soak your beans or grains, clean the water off, that will remove a lot of that as well, a lot of the phytic acid and things that cause gas to come. So you can actually remove a lot of that if you soak them, give them a good rinse, and then cook your beans, and you'll find that your fart levels will dramatically drop. Avoid 2 proteins at the same meal. That's a classic. Eating 2 proteins at the same time is absolutely going to cause flatulence. And eat fruit half an hour before a meal and 2 hours afterwards as well. So fruit goes through the digestion very quickly. That's covered in a food layering email and a food combining email that you'll get. And avoid mixing fruit and root vegetables. So basically leafy green vegetables combine with anything. Leafy green vegetables will combine with any food. Fruit, protein, carbohydrates, fats, anything. You can have avocado with them, you can have meat with them, or dairy, or nuts, or seeds, or whatever you like you can have with your leafy green vegetables with fruits. However, starchy vegetables do not combine with fruit. It's a classic mistake people make, having carrots and apples together, by the way. That's a classic example of it. So I don't recommend having your starchy vegetables with your fruits, because that will cause farting as well. Give your body a break as well, so it can rest and not digest. We'll talk about that a bit later on. So do not graze. That's the other thing. There's been trends about grazing for a long time, and I'll talk about exactly why. Because cavemen grazed on different foods. That's the key thing. Now, grazing in itself as a theory is not such a bad theory. It's actually not a bad one. And did we used to graze historically as mankind, as we were evolving? We did, yes, absolutely. But the thing is, we grazed on very, very different food. And that's what people miss. You cannot take something from the caveman days and suddenly think that if you graze on food that we're eating now, you're going to get the same result, because you won't. We ate freshly picked, digestive, rich enzyme, high green vegetable foods. That's what we grazed on. And that's fine. You graze on that as much as you want. Modern grazing is highly processed, high fat, low fiber, sugar rich, and devoid of nutrition, based around protein drinks and high protein bars. So that's nothing remotely close to what we were used to grazing on. So this food causes constipation, bowel problems, liver problems, weight gain, all the usual things that you guys know all about. So the body gets no rest when you're constantly grazing, and of course it's important that the body gets a chance to rest. And for many of you who are fasting 1 day a week, you'll actually start to get that rest with the body. You get 1 day off a week, you actually have that rest. The body gets a chance to rest, not digest. Over 60% of the energy you have can be used up on digestion. And if the body's using all that digestion energy, then of course your energy levels will drop significantly. That's why you get that mid-morning zzz and the mid-afternoon zzz. That's what happens when you eat too much food and the body sends all the blood and energy to the stomach. And it literally tells you to go to sleep. Have a sleep while we digest, because there's so much food in here. If you eat light and you eat less, of course the body doesn't do that. So the brain also plays tricks on you, and this is another interesting psychological aspect to grazing, where we go wrong. You actually think you're eating less or you're eating healthier when you're not. And the psychological headspace is snacking actually means that you end up eating more and you put less care into your food, because you think you've had a little snack on something good, so then it's okay then later on to have a muffin and a biscuit and a piece of chocolate cake or whatever, right? So you try to balance your foods out, and it's a common mistake people make when they're snacking. You live under the illusion that you are eating healthier and eating less than you are. It's one of the reasons why we've got the reality check sheet, which, those that fill it out get really good results from it, because you can give me the feedback. I can then tell you and let you know what you're eating and give you that feedback back. Because if you keep a food diary and write it down, you get present to what you're actually eating, as opposed to what you think you're eating. And the difference between what we think we eat and what we eat is massive. But when you're actually writing it down, you get a real rude awakening. And then when you have to give it to me, it's even worse, right? Because then I go, rah, 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 rah. So, it's really important to keep a food diary, particularly if you're grazing. I don't recommend grazing at all. I recommend 3 good meals a day, lower meal for dinner, and have some snacks in between on fruits and vegetables only if you want a snack. That's what I recommend. That works very, very well for most humans. More digestion equals more damage, and of course the more you eat, the more free radical damage you get. And of course the increase in that happens, the faster metabolism, the shorter the life. So you want to have a nice, slow, regular, solid metabolism, just like you want to be the snail through life, nice, slow, long, healthy, solid life, as opposed to the rabbit sprinting and then falling over, sprinting and falling over. So that's the kind of metabolism you want. You produce fewer free radicals and you live longer. So grazing makes you fat, essentially. When you look at the research behind it, it's actually the opposite of what we're sold from the high protein mixture, different companies that sell you things. In the West, about 33% of people now graze. Very, very common. It's amazing how quickly this trend has actually taken off in the West. 60% of people are now overweight. So does it seem to be working? Well, not very effectively, actually, when you look at it. People selecting snack-sized portions actually end up eating more. And the interesting thing is the food companies end up selling more. They love it. You notice all the snack-size, chunk-size things that are coming out now in every possible food. I saw it, what was the other thing I saw the other day? Oh, Whittaker's. And they are doing snack-size, big packs. You notice it's a big pack of snack-sized chocolate bars. So that it's incredible how the companies are doing it. And the other thing is what they call, I've forgotten the term actually, but it's framing is the term. Excuse me, framing is when the company will take a product which you're used to eating at a certain time or you're used to doing, then they move it to a different paradigm for you. So they take cornflakes, where you think, oh, this is a healthy breakfast, and then they start marketing it to you as an after-school snack. And how they do that is having TV adverts with kids coming home from school saying, "Hi, Mum," and pouring the cornflakes and eating the cornflakes on the TV ad. So you then start subliminally seeing it and going, "Oh yes, I can give the kids some cereal when they get home." And believe me, a lot of families do this. It's very common for the kids to eat cereal as snacks throughout the day. And of course, cereal is something I never recommend anyone ever eat boxed cereal. It's poison. But that's how we call framing, and that's what happens with snacking as well. The food companies end up eating more. So it doesn't help weight loss. I don't recommend it. If you want to lose weight, it's about what you eat and how much you eat. Two things: what you eat, how much you eat. I can guarantee you, you want to lose weight, eat lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of green vegetables. As much as you want every day, you will lose weight. So it's about what you eat and how much you eat, not the grazing. So how to cure constipation? Here's one of those critical slides that many people will be very interested in. So step number 1 is water. No other liquid will do. No, not even green tea. Even though green tea is a wonderful superfood and I recommend you all drink it, it's fantastic and I drink it every day, but it will not substitute for water. Water is a pH of 7. Human blood, 7.46. The nearest thing to the perfect balanced blood in the human body is pure water. The nearest thing. Fibre. Vegetable fibre is the most important. Number 2 is fibre. Single most important fibre there is vegetable fibre. Number 3, movement. Movement equals movement, right? So if you want a movement, right, you have to have a movement. Simple one to remember, but so many people go, "Oh, yeah." Movement is really important if you want a bowel movement, okay? You got to walk the talk. Rhythm and routine. This is something a lot of people miss when it comes to constipation. Be regular. If you have a regular bedtime, a regular wake time, a regular meal time, and a regular exercise time, you'll find your bowels will regulate phenomenally. And you'll find that you'll start going first thing in the morning when you wake, then mid-morning, and then early afternoon, like clockwork. Now, this doesn't mean you have to go to bed at exactly 10 o'clock and then fall asleep. No, but just roughly. So get the rough kind of rhythm, you know. Don't be too particular about it, but have a rough rhythm, and you'll find you'll regulate your bowels. Raw, sprouted, and fermented. They are the 3 best sources of bowel-stimulating fibre. All the different sorts of fibre, this is the best ones to get. Raw, sprouted, and fermented. And of course, so what is the best single source of fibre? Raw green vegetables, right? So you've got the vegetable fibre and you've got it raw. Best source. No question about it. The other way, if you want to go, eat more fermented sauerkraut. Fermented cabbage, my lord, that has an incredible effect on the bowel. Unbelievably good for the bowel. Something about cabbage that just makes the prebiotic growth and probiotic bacteria just grow like wildfire. Wonderful superfood. So if you get good quality sauerkraut into you, that'll have a huge effect as well. Stand up when you wake up. A little tip. It's a real little thing. You won't hear this anywhere else, but trust me, this works like a gold mine. Don't hit the snooze button. So if you've got a snooze button and you're constantly hitting it, don't hit it anymore. Just set it for 10 minutes later, or however many snoozes you have before you get up, right? So don't snooze anymore, just reset it. Okay, because the body, as soon as you wake up, it's like getting light in your eyes. If you want to reset your circadian rhythm, get light into your eyes regularly in the morning. It will reset your body clock. Same thing with your routine. Yes?
What about meditation and that when you wake up?
Yeah, meditation's great. The thing is you standing up though. So getting yourself standing up, because the body then says, right, we evacuate in the morning, we're wanting to clean the bowel out, we're ready, we're standing up, we're awake. What happens if you hit the snooze button, the alarm goes off and you go, oh, I'm going to wake up. And the brain goes, okay, get ready for evacuation, we're going to stand up soon. And then you go whack, and the body goes to sleep, and the brain goes, no, hold on, we can't evacuate in bed, just wait, hold on, pull it back in. And then it goes off again. You go, oh yeah, we're getting up now, get ready for an evacuation. And then you lie down and go, no, hold on, pull it back in. You know. So, and it, you know, that's exactly what the body does. And then it gets confused, and then you're constipated. And then when you stand up, it doesn't want to go. It goes, forget about it. No, I'm not going to go, forget it. You know, the boy who cried wolf. So you can literally train your bowels to go when you stand up by standing up every day. And then, you know, meditation, maybe just do a few stretches first and then settle into the meditation. And meditation is a wonderful thing to do in the morning, of course. As long as you've got enough sleep, of course. Otherwise, you'll fall asleep when you're meditating. So stand up when you wake up and put a mouse trap on your snooze button. If you can't stand up, you know, put a mouse trap on, that'll sort it out. The other one is squatting. And squatting is the crucial 7th final key if you want to cure constipation. Now, this is when most people kind of go, oh, and they look at me like I'm some kind of weirdo. The weird thing is, more adults on planet Earth squat when they go than don't. Squatting is the predominant way of removing feces from the bowel. Squatting. More adults do it than don't. We're in the minority here, right? But we think we're in the majority. right? So let's talk about squatting. So here's a nice picture of a gentleman squatting. Now, by the way, you'll notice I put some signs up here. Now, if you do go into a toilet and there's a big sign here saying no squatting on this toilet, then I don't recommend you squat. Okay, that's called a no squatting sign. It's a bit like no smoking on a plane. Okay, it's not a request, it's an order. Okay, so if you see a no squatting sign, please don't sit on the toilet and squat. So, but squatting itself is amazing, and I'll give you all the answers in a minute, so stay with me. Okay, I'm going to tell you how to do it. Now you can do it even with your own toilet at home and all these things, so we'll get to that. So the digestive canal is built to be open wide and evacuated. That's how it's built, while squatting, not sitting. That's what your bum looks like when you're sitting. That's what it's like, the canal, when you're squatting. Sitting, squatting, sitting, squatting. And I'll give you a demonstration in a minute. I've got of squatting, I mean, not going, right? But I've got this big thing in my back pocket, which is recording from Chris, recording the visuals. So if I can do it with that in my pocket, I'll give you an example. So sitting on the toilet essentially is like eating while lying down. Now, I don't know if many of you have tried actually eating while you're lying down. It's incredibly hard to do, and yet we do the same thing when it's releasing. So digestion was designed with squatting in mind. We're full of all these little tips tonight, notice? So humans have always squatted, most humans still do, and the rest of the world knows that the easiest, fullest stools come when the body is in a full, relaxed, open squatting position. Squatting takes all the pressure off the intestines. So it's a very natural, instinctual thing. You'll notice that if you ever watch a baby, as soon as babies start walking, you see any infant when they walk, right, they get up on their legs. What do they do when they go? And off they walk, right? They don't go, oh. No, they don't do that. They immediately squat. You'll notice all children will instinctively do it because that's how the body evacuates fully. So, squatting helps the appendix. Leads to constipation, leads to appendix damage. We know that. Squatting proactively protects the appendix. So when you squat regularly, you're literally protecting it. The appendix is attached to the cecum at the beginning of the colon, so harboring all that good bacteria, and the cecum will often not evacuate fully. So leaving you with, long-term diverticulitis and Crohn's and bowel problems and IBS and IBD and all these issues while in the sitting position. So when waste material gets built up and stuck in the colon, it can back up and end up with the appendix, causing, of course, appendicitis. And of course what happens is then it gets removed, and of course it's creating the very good things in the gut in the first place. So when you sit, that muscle grips the rectum in a choke hold, stopping the flow from the gut. The interesting thing is, why did we start using a toilet in the first place? And when you look back, it actually started with the Victorian snobbery, where we don't want to sit on the ground like the savages. That's actually where it came from. So we didn't want to be on the ground, no, we wanted to be sitting upright. And then it followed that anyone who had money thought this was a good idea because the royals were doing it, so it's a good idea and I'll do it, and I've got money and I'll do it, and I need one of those toilets because if you're someone, you need a toilet, right? It's really important. And so of course we're generations that have grown up with it, thinking that it's normal, and it's not. But it's actually a part of our life that we consider completely natural. However, it goes against the grain of how the human digestive system functions. So I know, but challenging tonight, isn't it? So squatting is a challenge, and it is. It's one of those things, I have to acknowledge it. It's a real challenge, but it does internally stretch and exercise. And you notice most yoga or any kind of stretching of any sort of yoga or any kind of Pilates or anything in any of that area that is good for the core part of the human body, you'll find has squatting involved in it. There is a process where you're squatting because it does incredible things internally for your gut. Helps you remain mobile and independent as you get older. Of course, makes a huge difference. My granny Amy, who died earlier this year at 104, she mentioned to my dad one day, she saw him squatting down and she walked past him and said to him, as long as you can do that, you'll stay alive. And it was really interesting. He didn't tell me until years ago. I only found this out about a year ago. When I was doing a seminar, he came along to a seminar, I talked about squatting. And he said, I never thought about it, but your granny Amy told me that once. As long as I can do that, I'll stay alive. And it was really interesting to hear from someone she was an incredibly wise old woman, lived to 104, no disease, no drugs, no illness, amazing woman. So the question here is, how do I squat? How do I squat? I know you're all going, okay, I get it, squatting's good. I can't quite get in that position, but I know I want to, and I'll be able to if I do enough yoga. But how do I actually squat every day? Right? So let's have a look at that, because there are some solutions here. So number one, put a squat system underneath your toilet seat. So this is the most basic, brutal way of doing it. Now, I used to sell squat systems on Waiheke Island, back when I knew Mason when he was just a tiny wee kitty, right? On Waiheke Island, I used to sell squat systems, which would go around the seat, and they actually go underneath the bottom seat. So you've got your top seat, and you've got your seat and your sorry, lid, thank you. You've got your lid in your seat and it goes underneath that, so it actually goes on the china. And it's just a wider panel so you can actually get your feet on it and squat. So that's one thing you can do, is put one of those in your system. And I used to sell them in the health food store. I had a local carpenter who used to make them and we used to sell them. So for most people though, that's not quite acceptable in the current world we live in, right? I acknowledge that. So the other thing you can do is place a small stool in your toilet. No? Okay. So you can raise your knees above your hips while sitting. So one of the other key things you can do, in fact, let me do it on a chair because it's a lot easier for people to see. So when you're squatting, the full squatting, of course, is like this. That's full squatting, like that. And of course, but at the very least, if you're sitting and you raise your knees above your bum like that, so at least you've got the upward motion with your knees being higher than where your bum is. That's at least a step. So if you can put a stool down, instead of sitting flat, you put a stool down, it raises your knees. So at least if you can do that, that is a step up. And a lot of toilets you'll find, it's quite easy to have a stool in there because some older people need some help getting on and things like that. So you can actually justify having a stool in there quite easily if you want to.
With the handlebars.
With the handlebars, yes. Yeah. So with handlebars. So the other thing you can do, and this is the easiest solution, and this is what I do, right? I don't squat when I go to the toilet. I don't need to because I'm not constipated anymore, right? But what I do is I do my yoga every day, and I do the squat position. If you do that every day, you'll be amazed at how it impacts and changes your bowel motions. It's one of those critical 7 steps. So if you get into that process, and for some people that can't do it initially, they can't even get close, it's okay. Your body, if you do anything regularly enough, you'll be able to get into that position over time. The Victorian snobbery, this is what I was talking about earlier. The porcelain throne came into widespread use around 150 years ago. Now, most bowel diseases, ironically, shock horror, started arriving about 150 years ago, around the same time as the toilet. You guys didn't realize that you'd be coming along for a toilet lecture tonight, did you? So diverticulitis disease only became a common disease in the 1920s. And of course, when you look at that, when did the white fibre come into play? About 1880. And when you look at that, it was about the same time, or just after, when toilets started coming in. So when you've got that combination of a lack of fibre and a lack of squatting and a massive explosion of bowel diseases shortly afterwards, which of course now we just call common. If you look at Africans versus Africans, this is a great comparison. Bowel diseases are non-existent amongst the fit rural Africans living on a natural plant-based high fibre diet and squatting. So they're fit, they're healthy, they're out in nature, they're running around, they're eating lots of fibre and they're squatting when they're going. No bowel diseases, rural Africa. Remember earlier when I talked to you about that quote from Dr. Dennis Burkett? He'd spent 25 years there studying rural Africans, not one case of bowel disease in 25 years of living there. However, when the Africans moved to America, they become USA-based Africans living on a highly processed, low-fibre diet and sitting. Rampant, varied bowel disease happens. So nothing to do with genetics. You can take the healthy Africans and put them in America within a decade. They're as sick as the Americans are. So it's not about genetics. It's about your diet and your environment and experiments. Same things happens with Asians. Asians in rural areas were studied. They showed exactly the same result. No bowel disease present while living on a natural plant-based whole food diet, moving every day, and of course squatting when they go. But when the Asians moved to Western countries, and we saw those studies happen after the Second World War, there was mass migration from Japan to Hawaii. So we actually got those studies where we can see those people moving from one country to another. Highly processed, low fibre diet, sitting on the toilet, bowel disease becomes rampant. Of course, what does bowel disease cause? Obesity, diabetes, heart disease, cancers, the fallout. So bowel transit time, the average Westerner goes about every 77 hours. It takes from when you eat it, you're basically eating on a Monday, you're eliminating on a Thursday or a Friday. That's generally how long it takes. Whereas African villages have an average transit time of 24 hours. So there's a huge difference in the speed of the food going through because of the high fibre stimulating the body. Eating on a Monday and eliminating everything by Tuesday. So is it a coincidence that eating a low fibre white flour diet and sitting on the toilet throne and lower levels of exercise all became widespread just before the obesity, bowel cancer, heart disease explosion happened in the Western world? Not coincidence at all. This is a crucial part of the cause of all the problems that we're living with. It's not coincidence, it's not genetic, it's not racial. You can take all those elements out of it because it happens all over the world. It affects everybody the same way because we're all human beings, we're all built the same way. We're all built out of the same exact material. It's the way the human body is designed. Digestion is designed that way. It's a shared human condition. Lifestyle-induced constipation leading to bowel diseases is 100% preventable and curable and treatable. 100%. Lifestyle induced, you can fix it. If it's genetic, obviously it's more of a challenge. But if it is lifestyle and diet induced constipation, you can sort it. Avoiding constipation, of course, will help you protect you from bowel illness, appendicitis, diabetes, obesity, weight gain, heart disease, cancers, a huge list of things. If you can avoid bowel problems and constipation, because they are the root cause of where your immune system lives and where your genetic expression is made. As we go over the tips this evening, kind of summarising it up, if you're wanting to transform your bowel and digestion, number one, wake up and stand up. That's the very first thing. Then do not snooze, okay? A large glass of warm water with lemon juice, aloe vera, apple cider vinegar in it. Wonderful way to start the day. You don't have to have all three. You can have any mixture. You can just have water if you like. I recommend warm water because it's easier on the digestion. But in summer, cold water's fine. So just whatever suits your particular constitution. Stretching routines, as you and I mentioned a bit earlier. Stretching routines first thing before the meditation until you have your first number two. So get up, do a few stretches, get your number two out. Then daily exercise. And again, getting into that routine of a certain wake time, certain exercise and stretch time, a certain meal time, and a certain bedtime. A solid, high-fibre breakfast. Solid, good breakfast that will see you through the day. For some people, they need to eat lighter in the morning. That's fine, eat lighter in the morning, but make sure it's something that's good and solid that's going to see your appetite through for a few hours. Animals always eat and drink separately. It's another interesting thing. You don't see the cows run off to the lake and drink and drink and drink and drink and then go back to eating grass. No, they do one or the other, and they always have a break between the two. 3 meals are ideal to rest, not digest. I'm full of all sorts of fabulous little sayings tonight. Always drink when thirsty. Do not drown yourself. Drink plenty of clean water. So there's no particular science, there's no rules around 8 glasses or anything like that. It's whatever suits your particular constitution. Because of course you'll find the more vegetable foods you're eating, the more high fibre vegetable foods, the more water you're getting anyway. Something like cucumbers, 96% water. So of course the more green vegetation you're eating, the less water you require. And of course the best quality water in the whole world is inside leafy green vegetables. That's the best water, bar none. That is the water that you want. And that's the water that comes with the fibre. So it's a perfect mix. Second best water in the whole world, spring water. Third best water, distilled. So they're the 3 waters that I recommend. Inside leafy green vegetables, then spring, then distilled. Why do I recommend spring and distilled? Because that's what Mother Nature does. She gives us water, springs or distilled. And there's lots of different waters. Whatever water suits you, go for it. But just make sure you get some good quality water in it. The more water you get, the better. Mick wee constipates me. What do I mean by Mick wee? Meat, cheese, wheat and eggs. Mick wee. Meat, cheese, wheat and eggs. Yeah. Yes, anything Mick will constipate you actually, but Mick wee constipates me. It's another thing to remember, just remember the things without fibre will constipate you. So if you're going to eat meat, if you can eat eggs, if you can eat cheese, if you can eat wheat, make sure you eat it with fibre, with good amounts of vegetables, because that will help you go. If you're eating them on your own like a hamburger, they'll constipate you. Raw, soaked, sprouted and fermented foods, that's the critical mixture of foods to give you that high bowel stimulation. Squat and pass the lot, or sit and hold on to it. I'll say that again, squat and pass the lot, or sit and hold on to it. Right, so start to get into squatting. Now, did I say that we all have to squat on the toilet every day? No. Right, can we get squatting in other ways? Yes. We all exercise, we all have dreams of exercising more, so get into the squatting. And like Naira says, if you need some help doing next to a window or have some, shoes on or have something that you work with, but get into the point where you can squat easily is a really, really good piece of advice. Small dinner, as your digestive system needs about 3 hours rest before bed. So like tonight, apart from Tracy's little snack she's going to give you, have a small dinner if you can. Give yourself a break before you sleep. The body likes to digest before it sleeps. And never try to stop your bowel motions happening. When they knock, let them out. Okay, if you've got a fart or a poo, let it out. It's really important. Okay, you train yourself to be constipated by holding on. So you must allow yourself to go. When you feel the need, go. The more regularly that you'll go, as soon as you get an urge to go, the better your bowels will function. Your bowels will go, oh, I can go, and I can just give a little stimulation and I'll go. Do not graze, right? Eat fruit 30 minutes before, 2 hours after meals, I said that. And rhythm, routine, and regularity. The 3 hours. The body thrives with a rhythm. Absolutely thrives with a rhythm.